She was 7 months pregnant. She had $340 in her account, and she was walking out of a marble mansion carrying a small black suitcase with a yellow ribbon on the handle, because the most powerful man in the room had chosen silence. Park Jae-won, Korean mafia boss, 34 years old. An empire built on fear, loyalty, and the word of his family. A man whose enemies disappeared quietly and whose name made rooms go still. He had tattoos on his neck, a Patek Philippe on his wrist, and every material thing a man could want. And Latrice, a black woman, beautiful, carrying his twin sons, stood in his kitchen while his mother looked out the window and said, without blinking, "My family wants a Korean." No anger, no hesitation, like she was describing the weather. And Jae-won stood in the doorway and didn't move. He watched the woman who had given him the only peaceful mornings of his adult life pick up her suitcase and walk past him, close enough to touch, and he said nothing. She didn't take the money. She didn't sign the papers. She walked out with nothing but her dignity and 2 lives inside her that carried his name whether he deserved it or not. But what happened 3 weeks later, what he found in that folder on his desk, and what he did next, in the middle of the night, alone, calling his lawyers not to erase her but to protect her, changed everything he thought he knew about power, loyalty, and what a man is actually building when he builds an empire. This is that story. And it doesn't end where you think it does. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click join to become a member and help our channel. The mansion sat above the city like a secret kept in plain sight. From the hills of Los Angeles, on a clear morning, you could see everything. The sprawl of the freeways, the thin line of the Pacific, the neighborhoods stacked below like pages in a book no one was reading. Park Jae-won had chosen this house for exactly that reason. A man who could see everything from above was a man who could not be surprised. He was wrong about that. But he wouldn't know it yet. Latrice Monet Holloway arrived at the Park residence on a Tuesday in October, referred by an agency that specialized in placing domestic staff in high-security households. She was 24 years old, with $78 in her checking account and a phone charger held together by electrical tape. She did not smile during the interview. She answered every question directly, without elaboration, without performance. The housekeeper who conducted the interview reported back to the family, "She is quiet and efficient. She will not cause problems." She was hired before noon. What the housekeeper did not report, because she did not notice, was the way Latrice paused at the doorway of the main kitchen and looked out at the hills through the floor-to-ceiling window for exactly 4 seconds before composing herself and walking in. It was not admiration. It was the kind of stillness a person performs when they are deciding whether to stay. She stayed. For the first 3 months, Latrice and Jae-won existed in the same house the way parallel lines exist. Close, consistent, never touching. He was present the way men in power are present. Heavily, loudly, even in silence. The whole atmosphere of a room bending slightly toward him when he entered. She moved through those same rooms like something the house had forgotten to account for. He noticed her on a Wednesday morning in January. Not in the way that is often told in stories like this one, not a dramatic moment, not a lingering look across a hallway. He noticed her because she was reading. It was 5:47 in the morning. His security detail did not arrive until 6. The cook did not come until 7. The house was the closest it ever got to empty, and Jae-won had come downstairs because he had not slept, and because the particular quality of silence at that hour was the only thing that ever quieted the machinery inside his head. Latrice was sitting at the kitchen counter with a book open beside a cup of tea she had made for herself. Her feet were tucked under her on the stool. She was not aware of him yet. And in the 4 seconds before she heard his footsteps and straightened and began to stand, because the staff always stood when he entered, he saw something he had not seen in that house in a very long time. A person at rest. "Don't," he said. She froze. "You don't have to stand." She looked at him the way people look at someone when they are recalibrating. Quickly, carefully, deciding how much to trust the thing they just heard. "It's early," she said finally. "Yes," he said, moving to the coffee machine. "It is." That was all. He made his coffee. She returned to her book. He stood at the window and looked at the city below. And she did not look at him. And neither of them said another word for 40 minutes. But when he went back upstairs, something small and structural had shifted. The way a single removed stone changes the integrity of a wall without the wall knowing it yet. That every minute he spent standing at that window, aware of her presence behind him, was a minute he was building something he would not have the courage to protect when it mattered most. The city below them had no idea. The family above them had no idea. And for a while, for a fragile, borrowed while, neither did they. The mornings became a ritual neither of them named. Jae-won never announced he would be downstairs. Latrice never prepared for him specifically. And yet, by the 3rd week of February, there was a second cup on the counter when he arrived. Black coffee, no sugar, the way she had observed him take it without ever being told. He sat down across from her for the first time on a Thursday. He did not bring his phone. That, in itself, was extraordinary. His security team would have found it alarming had they known. A man like Park Jae-won without his phone was a man who had decided, at least for 1 hour, that the world could not reach him. He asked her what she was reading. She told him. He had not read it. She did not offer to lend it to him, and he did not ask. But the next morning he looked it up on his phone before coming downstairs, and when she made a reference to the 3rd chapter, he understood it. And something shifted in the corners of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but the architecture of one. "You looked it up," she said. It was not a question. He did not answer. He drank his coffee. She let him have that. What Latrice did not allow herself to examine too closely was the fact that she had begun waking up 15 minutes earlier than necessary. She told herself it was the pregnancy of the house, the strange compressed energy of a place where men with guns stood outside every door and everyone spoke carefully. She told herself she woke early because early was the only hour the house felt like it belonged to no one in particular, and in that hour, she could exist without the specific weight of being the help. She did not tell herself the truth yet. The truth was still too dangerous to hold directly. Jae-won, for his part, had spent 34 years learning to identify threats before they materialized. It was the skill that had kept him alive through 3 internal power struggles, 2 federal investigations that dissolved for reasons no one discussed openly, and 1 attempt on his life in a parking garage in Koreatown that he still did not speak about even to his most trusted men. He could read a room the way other men read faces. He could feel the weight of a conversation before the first word was spoken. And yet, he sat across from Latrice Monet Holloway every morning and told himself this was nothing. Just stillness. Just the only hour of the day that didn't require anything from him. He was lying to himself with the practiced ease of a man who had done it before. But this time the lie was softer, kinder. The kind of lie a person tells not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. The kind that feels, for a while, indistinguishable from peace. It was Latrice who spoke first, on a morning in late March, when the city outside was wrapped in low fog, and the kitchen felt sealed off from the rest of the world in a way that made honesty feel briefly possible. "You don't sleep," she said. Not accusatory, just observational. The way she said everything. "No," he said. "How long?" He considered the question seriously, which surprised him. Most people who asked about his sleep were asking something else. Asking if he was well. Asking if they should be concerned. Asking in a way that was really about them. She was just asking. "Since I was 19, he said. She nodded slowly. "What happened when you were 19? The question landed in the room and stayed there. Jae-won looked at her across the counter. No one had asked him that. Not his mother, not his lieutenants, not the woman he had almost married at 31 before the family decided she was from the wrong faction and the engagement dissolved without ceremony. He did not answer, but he did not deflect either. He simply said, "Something I couldn't stop." "Most things are like that," Latrice said quietly. She turned back to her book. He turned back to the window. But the wall between them had lost another stone, and the structure was beginning to lean, and neither of them was looking at it directly enough to see. By April, they were talking every morning. Really talking, the kind that has no agenda, no performance, no exit strategy. He told her about growing up in Busan before the family moved to Los Angeles when he was 11. She told him about Alabama, about her mother, about the scholarship she had lost, and the city she had come to because it was the farthest from everything she knew. He listened the way powerful men almost never listen, without preparing his response while she spoke. She noticed. "You're not what I expected," she said one morning. "What did you expect?" She looked at the tattoos on his neck, the dragon, the characters. She looked at them openly, the way she had never allowed herself to before. "Less," she said simply. Something dangerous moved through his chest. He recognized it. He had felt it once before, a long time ago, before he had learned to close the door on that particular room inside himself. He should have closed it now. He didn't. And somewhere above them, in a bedroom on the 3rd floor, Park Soo-yeon slept the efficient sleep of a woman who had built an empire on knowing everything that happened inside her house. She did not know about the mornings yet, but she would. She always did. The first time he touched her hand, it was an accident. It was a morning in May, and the fog had come in heavy off the coast, pressing against the kitchen windows like something that wanted to be let inside. Latrice had reached across the counter for her tea. At the same moment, Jae-won reached for his coffee, and their hands met in the space between. And neither of them moved for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds is nothing. 3 seconds is everything. She pulled back first. He looked at his hand as though it had done something without his permission. The silence between them changed texture. It was no longer the comfortable silence of two people who had learned each other's rhythms. It was the silence of something that had been said without words and could not be unsaid. "I should start on the East Wing," Latrice said, standing. "Latrice." She stopped. He never used her name. In 4 months of mornings, he had never once said it out loud. Hearing it in his voice, low, careful, like he was handling something fragile, was almost more than she could process. She did not turn around. "This doesn't have to become something," he said. She was quiet for a moment, then, "I know." She left. He stood at the window for a long time. Below him, the city was waking up, indifferent and enormous, full of people making decisions they would spend years explaining to themselves. He made his. That evening, after the security team had done their final sweep and the house had settled into its nighttime silence, Jae-won walked to the east wing and knocked on the door of the small room where the overnight staff slept when they worked late. 3 times. Softly, Latrice opened the door. She had known he would come. She had known it since the morning, since the 3 seconds, since the way he had said her name like it cost him something. She had spent the entire day deciding what she would do when he did. She stepped aside and let him in. What passed between them in that room was not reckless. That is the part that makes it complicated. It was not the explosion of something that had been suppressed too long. It was quiet and deliberate. 2 people who had spent months learning each other in the only safe way available to them, now learning each other in the only way that remained. It was, in its own devastating way, the most honest either of them had been in years. Jae-won left before 4 in the morning. At 5:47, he came downstairs. Latrice was already there. The second cup was already on the counter. Neither of them spoke about it, but the quality of the silence had changed again. It was warmer now, and more fragile, the way a window is more fragile than a wall. The months that followed were built on that fragility. They were careful, extraordinarily careful. Jae-won had spent his entire adult life operating in an environment where carelessness was fatal, and that discipline extended here. No visible tenderness in front of staff, no altered routines during the day, no evidence. Latrice, for her part, had spent her whole life making herself invisible in spaces that were not built for her, and she understood instinctively how to move through the house without disturbing its surface. But invisible and hidden are not the same thing. Park Soo-yeon noticed her son sleeping better, noticed the particular stillness that had settled over him. Not the cold stillness of control, but something warmer. Something she did not recognize at first, and then recognized immediately. She said nothing. She began watching. It was the housekeeper who confirmed it, not with proof, with the specific knowledge of a woman who has managed a household for 20 years and understands that a room tells you everything if you know how to read it. 2 cups, a book left open on the counter, the way the air sat differently in the kitchen on mornings when Jae-won had been there. She brought it to Soo-yeon on a Wednesday afternoon, quietly, the way bad news is always delivered in houses like this one. Soo-yeon listened, set down her tea, looked out the window at the same hills her son looked at every morning. "How long?" she asked. "Several months, I believe." Soo-yeon was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly level, the voice of a woman who had already decided the outcome before she had all the information, because in her experience, the information rarely changed the outcome. "And the girl, is she attached?" The housekeeper hesitated. "I believe so, yes." "Then we have a problem," Soo-yeon said simply, not with anger. Anger would have been easier. She said it the way you say, "It will rain tomorrow," with the tired certainty of someone who has seen this particular storm before and knows exactly what it destroys. She did not go to Jae-won immediately. She was too strategic for that. Instead, she waited. She watched. She let the situation develop for 3 more weeks, gathering information the way she had always gathered it, quietly, completely, until she held enough that the confrontation would be unanswerable. It was the pregnancy that forced her hand. Latrice had not told anyone. She was 8 weeks along when Soo-yeon's personal physician, who also, quietly, managed the medical privacy of everyone who lived under that roof, brought her the information. A routine observation, a small detail. Soo-yeon sat with it for one full day. She looked at the hills. She thought about her husband, dead 12 years, who had made one similar mistake and spent the rest of his life managing its consequences. She thought about the organization, the 37 people whose livelihoods depended on the park name meaning something specific, something legible, something that the allies and the enemies and the law enforcement officials who watched them all understood in the same way. She thought about her son's face on those mornings she had begun watching from the top of the stairs, and then she stopped thinking about his face. Arrange a meeting, she told her brother-in-law, Tae-sung, the following morning. The three of us, and prepare an envelope. Tae-sung looked at her. How much? He asked. Soo-yeon named a figure. Then she added, and an agreement. She signs or she discovers what it means to have no agreement at all. She said it without heat, without malice, with the quiet finality of a woman closing a door that she had decided would not be opened again. Upstairs, Jae-won was getting dressed for a meeting with his financial team. He was thinking about the morning, about the second cup, about the way Latrice had looked at him the previous night when she thought he was asleep. Not with longing, exactly. With something more serious than longing. With the expression of a person who is memorizing something because they understand, somewhere below consciousness, that they will need the memory later. He had not understood what she was memorizing. He would, soon. The meeting happened on a Thursday morning. Jae-won did not know about it until it was already over. That was intentional. Soo-yeon had timed it with the precision she applied to everything. Her son had a financial meeting across the city that would run until noon. The house would be his after that. By the time he returned, the conversation would be history. The envelope would have been presented, and the situation would be resolved in the clean, final way that situations in their world were always resolved. She had not accounted for Latrice. Tae-sung laid the envelope on the kitchen counter at 9:47 in the morning. $15,000 and 4 pages of legal language that amounted to a single sentence. You were never here. He explained the terms without ceremony, without cruelty, and without any visible awareness that he was speaking to a person rather than a problem. He had done this before. The mechanics were familiar to him. Soo-yeon stood near the window. She did not look at Latrice directly. She looked at the hills, the way she always looked at the hills when she was saying something she had already decided. My family wants a Korean, she said. Simply. Finally. The way you state a fact about weather. Latrice looked at the envelope. She looked at Tae-sung. She looked at Soo-yeon's profile against the window. The straight back, the perfect stillness, the absolute absence of doubt. Then she looked at the door. Jae-won was standing in it. He had come back early. The financial meeting had ended in 40 minutes. A simple matter, resolved quickly. And he had come home because something in him had been restless all morning. Some unnamed frequency running beneath his thoughts that he had not been able to identify until this exact moment. Standing in his own doorway, looking at the tableau in his kitchen. His mother at the window, his uncle with an envelope. Latrice with her hand on the counter and her chin raised, and the expression on her face that he had never seen before. Not fear, not tears, not the collapse he might have expected. Something harder than all of those things. Jae-won, his mother said, without turning. You're early. What is this? He said. It was not a question. A conversation that needed to happen. Without me? Yes. Now she turned. Her eyes were steady, patient, the eyes of a woman who has rehearsed this. Because you would have made it difficult. And it isn't difficult, Jae-won. It's simple. It's always been simple. The room held its breath. Jae-won looked at Latrice. She was looking back at him with that expression, the memorizing expression, the one he had seen in the dark and not understood. He understood it now. She had known this was coming. Not the specific morning, not the specific envelope, but the shape of it. The inevitability of it. She had been memorizing him because some part of her had always known she would need to survive the memory. "Sign it," his mother said to Latrice, quiet and absolute. "Take the money. You'll have enough to start somewhere new. This doesn't have to be painful." "It's already painful," Latrice said. Her voice was level, extraordinarily level. The voice of a woman spending every reserve she had on not breaking in this room, in front of these people. That part already happened. Soo-yeon's expression did not change. Then let it end cleanly. Latrice looked at Jae-won one last time. The look lasted 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, she gave him everything. Every morning, every silence, every cup of coffee, every 3 seconds of a hand touching a hand in the fog. She gave it all back to him in a look and waited. He stood in the doorway. He did not move. The dragon on his neck was visible above his collar. The characters on the other side. Blood answers to blood. He had chosen those words at 22 in a tattoo parlor in Koreatown, when he had believed completely that loyalty to blood was the highest form of loyalty there was. He had worn them on his skin every day since. He had never questioned them. He questioned them now. For 4 seconds that felt geological, enormous and slow, like something tectonic shifting far below the surface. He questioned everything he had built himself around, and then the fear moved through him. The old fear. The specific fear of a man who watched his father die surrounded by people who served him, and no one who loved him, and who had spent 34 years building walls against that particular death, only to find himself constructing the same architecture from the inside. He stayed in the doorway. Latrice nodded once, almost imperceptibly. The nod of a woman who had already known the answer and had asked the question anyway, because some part of her had needed to hear it directly. She picked up her mala. She did not take the envelope. "Latrice," he said. Her name again. The same way as before, like it cost him something. This time it cost more than he had expected to pay. She walked past him through the doorway. Her shoulder came within inches of his arm. She did not stop. He listened to her footsteps cross the marble hallway. He listened to the front door open. He listened to the small sound of wheels on the front step. The mala, the black one with the yellow ribbon on the handle. Then silence. "You did the right thing," his mother said behind him. He said nothing. He walked to the window she had vacated and stood where she had stood and looked at the hills below. The city was going about its morning, indifferent and enormous. Somewhere in it, Latrice Monet Holloway was walking away from him with $0 of his money and 2 lives inside her that he did not yet fully understand were the most important thing he would ever almost lose. The right thing. He turned the phrase over. It had the weight of something true and the taste of something rotten, and he stood with both of those sensations simultaneously and understood for the first time that those 2 things were not mutually exclusive in his world. They lived together constantly. He had just never felt them about something that mattered this much. 3 weeks passed. He went through the motions of his life, the meetings, the restaurants, the careful management of power and fear that constituted his days. He slept badly again. The kitchen at 547 was just a kitchen. It was Dae-sung, of all people, who told him. Not out of sentiment, out of the same practical intelligence that governed everything he did. "She didn't sign," he said one evening, setting a folder on Jae-won's desk. "Which means, legally, everything is still open. You should know that." Jae-won opened the folder. 2 names. Birth certificates, not yet filed. Marcus Park Holloway, Miles Park Holloway. He looked at those names for a long time. "She used my name," he said. "Yes. She didn't have to." "No," Dae-sung said. "She didn't." Jae-won closed the folder. He sat in the silence of his office. The expensive silence of a powerful man who had everything his family had built and nothing that he had chosen. And he made a different decision than the one he had made in the doorway. He called his lawyers that night. Not to pursue a confidentiality agreement. To recognize his sons. To build a trust that the family could not touch, administered by people who answered to no one in that house. To ensure that Marcus and Miles Park Holloway would never stand in a doorway somewhere, choosing between who they were and who they loved, and make the wrong choice because no one had ever shown them another way. He could not undo the doorway. That was the truth he carried. Some decisions calcify the moment they are made, and no subsequent action dissolves them entirely. Latrice had walked out that door, and the door had closed, and it did not open again the same way it had been before. But he appeared on the first Friday of the following month at an apartment in Compton, alone, without his phone, wearing jeans and a black shirt with his tattoos visible, and nothing else to recommend him except the fact that he had come. And he would come again, and again after that. Not to reclaim something. Not because love is a debt that can be repaid. Because Marcus and Miles deserved to know that their father, when it finally mattered, had found his way through the doorway, even if it took him too long. Even if the woman who had made him worth finding his way was no longer waiting on the other side. Some men spend their whole lives building empires, the city below seemed to say on those Friday evenings, indifferent as ever. And only discover, much too late, what they were actually building them against. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been in a room where someone looked right through you? Where your presence, your worth, your love was reduced to an inconvenience, to be paid off and removed? And the one person who knew your value said nothing? Have you ever had to walk away from someone, not because you stopped loving them, but because staying would have cost you the last thing you had left, yourself? And have you ever watched someone do the right thing, too late to save what mattered, but just in time to save who they were? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all, and if you believe in stories about dignity, redemption, and the kind of love that survives even the worst silences, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click Join to become a part of our community and help the channel.